and invite Elzbieta Matynia to come forward, who's going to lead the next panel. She is, well, you've got her bio. What I want to tell you about Elzbieta is this is someone I'd met in a meeting at Parsons years ago, and she was trying to solicit some attention for this project in Poland that I didn't really fully understand, and I thought, well, I only teach, you know, people who do writing and research, and she was looking for some interest on Parsons' part in somehow getting involved in her Democracy Institute in Poland to possibly create something, create another dimension to the experience of studying the process of creating democracies and the processes of negotiation, the processes that lead to agency. Years later, flash forward, I found myself in discussions with her I think actually through Malgo. It was, anyway, and we ended up co-teaching a course in Poland last summer. And one of our first conversations, not even a conversation, I walked into a room like this and she's promoting this institute, and I stand up and I go, I'm here to tell you that buildings have agency. And then about a week later, we had a discussion, and Elzbieta said, well, people have agency. And so therein lies the roots of this discussion that's coming up. I think we had fantastic discussions. As I said earlier, I'm torn between thinking the objects make the world sentient and the agent is the who. So this was the quote I had up earlier for us to think of. Elzbieta will do exactly what Hazel and Elizabeth did. She'll introduce the panel and then she'll lead a conversation. She is a professor of sociology and liberal studies and the director of the Trans-Regional Center for Democratic Studies. And the Democracy and Diversity Institutes are part of that, one of which was in Wrocław, which I mentioned last night, and there's another in Johannesburg. Her research in political and cultural sociology focuses on democratic transformations, gender, and democracy, the borderlands of a shared Europe, and more recently, the challenges faced by democracies emerging with a legacy of violence. Her books include Performative Democracy and the forthcoming Havel Michnik, The Uncanny Era of Post-Revolution, Conversations Over a Quarter of a Century. Please welcome Elzbieta.
I'm very much a newcomer here, so I'm very anxious, but I'm incredibly honored, and I'm here to learn, and I'm terribly sorry I wasn't able to be here last night. So we are going to talk about agency, and I actually I should introduce our two speakers, and whom I didn't yet meet, but I'm going in a second, but I did read everything I could about them. And I'm excited. So at the first place we have, I'm going to welcome a man first because he came from California, and he's not home-based here yet. So a guest, Sean Donahue, is a principal of research-centered design. Just listen to that, research-centered design, not research center, research-centered design. Los Angeles-based design practice. He's a former director of the Humanities and Sciences at Art Center College of Design. And he's now co-launching MDP Plus Field, a graduate degree track within the Art Centers and Graduate Media Design Practices program. I learned that he's a world traveler. He came recently from East Africa. He is working on spaces and moves such as earthquakes, and so we are going to have here. We are welcoming Sean Donahue, and I think I should invite him there, or how? Yeah. I gather it's you. I gather it's you because of your broad smile when I welcome a guest. And so this is really, yes, please take a seat. And our own, the second speaker, the second.
We're not going to sit first. We're going to present and then sit and talk.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, there is a routine here, and we should stick, and it will be more productive if we stick to it. We'll talk about how structures are constraining us later. Lara Penin is our own assistant professor at the School of Design Strategies here at the New School. She's coordinating in the area of study of service design in the integrated design program. And she's a part of DESI's lab. Her work focuses on design for sustainable social innovation and service design. And the bios are nice, informative, and long, and you have them in the program. So we'll welcome Lara. And do you want me to start? Or the presentations? Very good, yes. So what we will do is that we invite Sean to talk about his stuff, Lara about his stuff, I will talk about my own, and we'll try to see how we are going to meet halfway through.
Hi. I am indeed Sean Donahue, and I did indeed travel from Los Angeles to here. I will return back this evening, so I am very excited to be here. And Susan and I have been having an ongoing conversation about this issue for the last couple years, so it's exciting to keep that conversation going. I'm going to talk through this idea of agency through looking at a range of projects that I would define as my practice. That'll include maybe looking specifically at one or two projects, but also a kind of triangulation of the terms by which I operate around this idea of agency and the ideologies, the institutions, and the interests that come together to exercise or call people into action to exercise those agencies. And some of the problematics. And so I'm hoping to not define agency necessarily as much as offer some perspectives and questions around agency for us to have that conversation. And so I start with this kind of framework for myself of this idea of unmapping, and much of my work is about not necessarily solving problems. My background is in design, graphic design, media design, and that ranges from work that deals with furniture and environments to experiences and visual rhetoric. But how those come together to call people into exercising their agencies. And so I start with this framework that I make things. And so when I look at the world around me, when I put things back into that world, it is through understanding and through seeing our relationship between the material and built environments, how they influence us, how the socialization of those things into our relationships with each other produce and or respond to the dialogues that are happening in that space or the actions that are happening in that space. And I would take that even further, breaking that down into the languages of design. So even if we're talking about something like a chair, how is its position, its texture, its form, its relationship to other things in the composition of the room, structuring that. And so it is the framework that I translate the world through in order to understand how I have conversations with something as action-oriented as agency. And so for me, it's about producing things that go into this question that pose questions and different kinds of questions. And so I'll talk you through some things that maybe frame that from a formalist perspective. This is a Z-Corp printed poster that instead of a kind of broadcast model where you are given or fed the message, it calls you into participating as the producer of that message. So you have to roll the ball and ink it in order to unfold the dialogue that's happening on it. And the unfolding of that is poetic in the sense of it unfolds in different ways because it's a sphere as opposed to a flat object. It also asks you to engage, if you continue that thread, into the labor of reproduction. Serialization, as rules much of how design contributes to the world, involves the repetition of production. And it calls into question the labor that's involved, just not in the poetics of producing something that unfolds, but in the serialization of that and the questions that come into play as we engage those. The production of printed publications, this is a typeface that every time you use it, the serifs continue to grow. And so it reveals not only the artist's production in making of these things. Every time you open InDesign, it expands. Every time you you make a new PDF or print it, it expands. But it also connects to variable printing, and so every time you print it, it expands. And so it does not conceal, but foregrounds the production and your choice to use it or not use it. So by holding back from using a typeface too much, you actually get a different legibility than you would if you continue to use it and make changes and make edits and use it over and over and again. Continuing that line of thread, challenging the idea of continuity, which is so central to typeface design as defined by prior technologies, the fixed printing press, where the ascenders and descenders and the X heights all must be modulated to share a cohesive language because that technology was fixed. But now we have technology that is dynamic. And so what happens when you can talk about experiences of continuity? That continuity is much a gesture as it is a fixed form. And so this is a typeface that every time you open it, it connects to the local RSS feed of earthquakes that are in your area. And surprisingly, many parts of the world, like Los Angeles, have earthquakes hourly. You just don't know about them. You don't necessarily feel them. And so it, in perpetuity, locks a typeface to its location, to where it's being exercised as. And the geothermal events that are happening as part of that. And so it's not timeless, it's time specific. It's not consistent through a 19th or 18th century technology. It's consistent in its relationship to how it responds to a set of conditions. And then becomes a timeline. But part of producing these things, and this gets to the idea of agency, is photographer, illustrator, InDesign do not allow you to produce these things. The programs that are established to support the production of our own design material and the power and authority that produces them aren't privileged in the sense of exploring this issue. So creating this question requires that you actually also produce the mechanism by which you are able to do this. So the typeface itself isn't the outcome. The tools of production need to be created in order to pose a different kind of question around this, unlocking the hegemony of software and IP, not just what it means to have an aesthetic value based on contemporary and historical questions. So this idea of agency is not just one that designers endow onto those they work with, but one that we have to ask centrally to our own contributions, our own experiences in creating contributions that go out into that space. And so I want to continue this line that moves more away from the designer, but into the person, to how to opportunities to exercise agency. So a plate is a very proportioned space, and we each have our own cultural responses to that, but how to invite people to think about how they proportion that plate through a different set of terms. So instead of thinking of it as the meat portion, the vegetable, the carbohydrate, thinking about as guilt or hope in relationship to how you understand how you eat and proportion your food. Eating is for me sometimes, it's for them sometimes. Sometimes I don't know why I'm eating, I just feel like I have to. For my health, for my friends, giving people a different set of terms by which they can exercise an agency around health and lifestyle choices. One of the largest health concerns, not of just America anymore, but the globe. India, China, this is where those questions are emerging. Thinking about the future, the past. Again, giving people the opportunity through design choices to exercise agency in a way around a question or an experience. Continuing this, so it's not just about the person in their home, but industries that support that allow us to make more unhealthy choices. And so we're not just combating our own vices, if you will, or our own impulses to eat fast food. There's more fast food in the world. And Doritos, the packaging is designed, but Dorito is designed. It is a food aesthetic. How do we allow people to question the very industries? And so Clyde's comment yesterday, the forces against us sometimes don't coalesce with that, actually resonates with me. Because even though we are asking people to live healthier lives, make better choices, we're being supported in a world with more unhealthy choices by an industry that's exhibiting power and authority based on another set of conventions that are good for them, and sometimes that's profit. So this is also a bag of Doritos, but it's just the ingredients that make up the Doritos. So you're welcome to eat either one. It is the exact same thing. And so you're consuming the exact same ingredients, but through a different choice system. And what kind of agency can come out of that? This is a project that was done by a student in information design. So the work I'm going to show you is a mix of my own research and a range of work from graduate researchers in our program. And then how do you continue that conversation about agency where you take yourself out of the equation but give other people tools to have a dialogue with the world around them through what they see, through the built-in material and consumable environment. So we gave cell phones with pictures to a community of teenagers in Inglewood, and we asked them to just document everything they saw around them that they thought had a relationship with food. So that was everything from the flyers that were sitting outside the Mexicatessen to the signs that were outside of the fast food restaurants or the restaurants they walked by on the way to school. And there's a long list of those. And the thing about this one is that kids eat free, which when you're talking about a demographic of population where socioeconomics play a significant role in how you make a choice, and you have multiple children, multifamily households are very common in this district, kids eating free is not just a great service or a value add, it's a strategy. It's a tactic. And something like a playground, when you don't have open space, and LA is known for its access to lots of nature's wonders, it is not known for its civic parks or its outside recreation areas within an urban landscape. And so when you have a place that has a playground in a space where there are no safe or any playgrounds, again, the agency that's asked to being exercised here is to use this as a home to support that. And when you can eat for 50 cents at the same time, agency is being asked to be exercised. Maybe not the best agency for this particular community, though. And so when we're talking about something like a food desert, which Inglewood is definitely suffering from, there's lots of data on this. There's no shortage of content to help you make informed decisions from a political capital standpoint. The problem is the connection to how it actually influences, impacts people in their day-to-day lives never gets drawn out of that data. And so when you want to influence authorities around zoning as a community to exercise different kind of agencies towards different outcomes, you need to exert other kinds of resources. And so this is a map of, among the things that we saw, a map of fast food restaurants, and which, if you look over the course of the entire community, you see suspiciously cluster around community spaces, whether that's a church or a clinica or a preschool or charter school, and traffic hubs. And so there's clearly a systemic attempt to take advantage of cultural concentrated areas. That has to do with mixed zoning regulations, not necessarily chasing fast food people out. And what are ways to do that? So I want to bounce against this idea of kind of ideologies and platforms of engagement that, you don't have to go. I was interested yesterday, this triangulation that's happening of design, social entrepreneurism, ideologies, both historical and contemporary, that we're forced to engage in. And I don't think you have to look far to see design's social impact in the world. Design has not shunned from that, particularly my disciplines, product, graphic, trans. And so anything from just publishing. So this is a picture of a men's interest section at Borders bookstore. And this is the picture of the women's interest section at the Borders bookstore. The men's interests and the women's interests are not too divergent, and to me look more like they're all geared towards men's interests. Now, of course, they're dressed a bit differently. But you can clearly recognize that the exposed clavicle, the way that they're facing, it's sending not an unsimilar orientation to how we understand this, save the disembodied legs that are nicely placed on that gentleman's lap. And so the codes may be slightly different, but they're also very similar. And design has been helping to produce this for a very long time. The same with issues around strength. Size and power are embodied within many masculine symbols, but also how does this become a symbol of strength when we're talking about codes, signs, and symbols within a consumer communication culture? And how can agency be expressed around that differently? The same with aging, an area that I do a lot of work on. We tend to think of them as an isolated group, but for this man, his family probably has more decision-making capabilities than he does in relationship to his future and ending up in a space like this, which is an innovation of its time, the senior care facility. They're very friendly there, clearly, and are exercising some really fantastic friendships and warmth, which speaks to these people, not this person. And so what agencies are being expressed? And a lot of my work now does go international. And so it's, for me, when I look at bureaucracy and in institutions, also is a question of what format does that take? How does that get embodied, not as a set of ideas, but how do those ideas get communicated? How do meetings that come together that put these ideas together, what's the structure of those? How are people oriented? And so these are treaties from the three major design philosophies in the world that are cited by the UN, cited by the WHO, Design for All, Universal Design. The key thing that's embedded in all of those is the connection between a fulfilled senior life and the enjoyment of goods and services, which to a Western civilization seems like completely appropriate. But when you translate that into something like Eastern Africa, like this project does, this is not a project of mine, what it does is it makes something that was free a capitalist service now. So water typically in a community is a community water spot. There are issues with transporting it, but you have access, and there's different authorities and powers that determine that. But when you commodify it and turn it into a service, you also monetize it, which means you also take it out of the hands of many people that had free access to it before. And so when we talk about neoliberalism and what designers do when they go to other countries, these are things that we have to confront around agency. And so that gets me to this point of things designed with affordances that invite people to have different kinds of expressed agencies. So something as simple in community conversations like giving each other a hug. As designers, we're able to not just stick to the facts, but play things like delight and play and caring, and that even means between authorities of power. How do you break up the domestic space to afford different kinds of agencies, typically paternalistic or maternalistic? How do you give teens the authority in a household conversation around access and issues? So this created a text wall that allowed people to use the cell phone as the way they communicated with their domestic community. And that privileged clearly the teenagers. They were much more adept at using the cell phone as a communication tool. And background the parents. And then how do we look at this agency over time? So LA Has Faults is a project that Susan had mentioned briefly yesterday as well. How do you work with the designer out of the central figure when we're talking about exercising certain abilities? And so this is a project that worked around emergency disasters, emergency preparedness in a community called Westlake, which is predominantly Latino and mixed Latino. And so that means it included quite a bit of indigenous communities from South and Central America where Spanish was not their primary language, but would have been considered a second language, along with English in their experiences. And so something like Univision or Telemundo, which is considered diverse within the broadcasting lexicon, actually plays little role in how stories and communications made from point A to point B. But this space, however, is a very significant open space in Los Angeles. It's called MacArthur Park, and it has a long history in LA, and it's also central to this community, both in what some people would call their informal systems, like childcare, but also in the daily life of a couple that wants to just take some time and hang out and eat lunch by the park. And so when you want to talk to a community that is going to be basically the most impacted by an 8.0 earthquake, which Caltech says we will get in Los Angeles within our lifetime. We are going to get an 8.5 earthquake or greater. It's going to happen. It's not if, it's when. They will be disproportionately affected in Los Angeles. And there's lots of reasons why, but I won't go into that. But at a time when the Bush administration also was deporting people out of LA, which for a long time had been what had become to be called a sanctioned city, where people knew they wouldn't be deported even if they were undocumented. And so going in to have a conversation was not just about educating them on what it meant to have an earthquake or be emergency prepared. South and Central America have lots of earthquakes. They have lots of experience. And so how do you allow them to lead the conversation through their experiences and what resources they feel are necessary for them to respond to an emergency disaster, to exercise the agencies that are already embodied within them in ways that institutions don't afford them now. And so starting that conversation by just simply posing some words or language around this idea: stop, shake, halt, shift. These are about 2-story letters. But the important part of this was when we actually made the piece. It took about 2.5 hours to construct each one. And most of the energy that was put towards it from people in that community were during this time. Not when the letters were up, because when the letters are up, it's like, oh, that's weird, it says shift. But when we were building things and at this scale, people were like, what the hell are they doing? What are all those boxes there for? And so that's when they would come and engage us. When the children would start to hang out in the interiors of the letters and make the play space their own. When they would start to get involved in the production. When it wasn't just us handing things out, but talking to people in the natural spaces that they already have conversations, not asking them to do something extracurricular. And then starting to spend information from us to each other around emergency preparedness. So I'm going to skip through that. This was important all because it comes to the second half of the project, was that we were going to be staying in that space for the next few months. And we designed a space for them to lead the conversation for their community and have access to different authorities in the city, whether that was the Center for Emergency Management or the Governor's Office for Emergency Preparedness, where they could lead those conversations and find resources and develop resources that were interesting, that were supportive of them. And so this is different exercises to talk about what kind of conversations would be there, how would they be enabled. So this is the retail space that was aligned along the park and what we transformed it into. And I just want to talk about some details of the space. The idea of how do you turn something from a retail space into a community conversation space. So a table that breaks the front plane that allows people outside to just sit down, which is illegal actually in Los Angeles, but inviting them to do that in order to make a space their own, to inhabit it, and continue that sightline inside literally in order to have a different kind of conversation. And then host lunches and events that would bring different community members, whether that's the parish of the local church or the principal of the local school, and represent voices that couldn't be there. So most town hall events are for white middle-aged homeowners to secure their own interests, not for people that actually have life questions around governance. And so how to embody their positions on these things and have them represent and provide a conscience for the conversations. And then how to do what some may call passive-aggressive things. So how to design a space that makes people sit in a bench style, which is you have to negotiate with somebody else to sit down constantly. How you sit and how that feels. So the chairs were cut just a little bit lower than normal. So for men, basically, in suits, when they sat down, it was uncomfortable because you would be sitting just a little lower than you would normally, so it makes the back of your tailored suit bunch, and it makes your ankles show in a way that just makes you feel awkward and look silly, actually, because you just don't really see calf on men usually, and most of these guys are uncomfortable with that, and so they jostle on their seats a lot. It just gives them a slight lack of confidence that they may express by default in these spaces, given some undue privilege based on their position. And then serving lunch in a way that simulates some of the resources they actually provide. So, many people that receive FEMA food, like in an emergency situation, aren't so much worried that they're going to get the food because they see it coming, they kind of see it there. Obviously, there's examples where that's not the case. But one of the big questions is, what am I getting? And how can I serve my aging parent, my child that may have, just because you're in an emergency doesn't mean your child's dairy allergy stops getting thought about. And I know that's silly, but it's true. And so how to simulate that during conversations that were about programming. And so we made the lunches in these ambiguous boxes, and this is what you would get in your lunch. And then we would do things like if there was 6 people at a table, we'd only give them 3 cookies. And so they'd have to negotiate how they shared those cookies, right? So do you break it in half? Do you just eat it without thinking? How do you respond to this shortage? And what were your default assumptions? this person shared. Thank you.
So hi, Susan. Thanks for inviting me. Hi, everyone. So my name is Lara Penin, and I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that will hopefully illustrate how do we understand, how do I understand engagement and agency in the work I've been doing together with my colleagues at Parsons Desis Lab. Desis, I think I should clarify what it means. And it means design and social innovation for sustainability. We are design and social innovation for sustainability. I can sing it too if you want. Basically, we are a research lab within the new school at Parsons. We're primarily based on the disciplinary speaking in design, but also related to social science and management. We have colleagues and students and faculty members who are affiliated to the lab, coming from all these different disciplines and parts of the school. One of the things that we do in terms of the way we work, our fundamental principles, it's a couple of things. One is we really look into change society, so promote change. And we look into revaluing tacit knowledge that communities already have and try to unearth those. We look into what we call structural holes, so gaps in society that weren't filled so far, that weren't resolved as open problems, open questions. And we try to also nurture what our colleague Nidhi Srinivas calls heterarchies as opposed to hierarchies. So try to imagine how we can connect people and organizations in a horizontal way, getting rid of the usual vertical power structures, if you will. So these are principles in terms of the framework of our work. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show 3 projects actually, and then try to come up with some conclusion about about agency and our work in relation to agency. So the first project, it's called Amplify Creative Communities. The big question behind this project was, can design help amplify existing social innovation, grassroots, bottom up, things that people are already doing by themselves on their own, in their own small context in the neighborhood, even in some cases the context of a single household. So we got a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation back in 2009, the Culture Innovation Funds in New York City. And then in this project, what we proposed to do was to go into specific neighborhoods across the city, and then later we expanded this to other parts of the world to try to learn from people, understand what are people already doing in terms of transformative practices in their everyday life that could be somehow understood as a hint or an anticipation of more bigger scale change in society in terms of behavior change towards sustainability. Now, I think what we really wanted to do is to try to change the register of the whole discourse around sustainability into a more positive one, and not trying to change by imposing rules or anything. We wanted to see what are the good things about it already happening and try to look at them with more focused lenses. So we had this hyper-local approach. We went to a couple of neighbors in the city who understood that the city in itself, it's such a huge and complex universe, and cities with the size of ours here and others we've been working on in more recent years, neighborhoods can be universes on their own, and they have their own history, they have all their own interests in their own particular social innovation. So we started in the Lower Side in Manhattan for good reasons, because we knew there were a lot of interesting social capital there. There was interesting tensions going on. And then later we went to Williamsburg, Greenpoint, and the other side of the river in North Brooklyn. a very interesting situation in terms of gentrification process going on. And I'm going to show a couple of images here that are already gone because it changed so fast. Recently we had also a small action of this project in the Bronx Parks, Unmap Park in the Bronx. It's a little bit different from the other two. So the things we did in this project was first to try to do some immersive historical research and understanding, if we want to talk about the situation today, we want to really understand and go a little bit back into the past and see what are the layers of history and social capital and tensions over history that brought us to where we are. So the Lower East Side, I think everybody's familiar with that, image of the beginning of the last century, super dense streets, the tenement houses, all the immigrants and etc. Then all the movements in terms of art and all kinds of manifestations of it along the 50s, and then the occupation of Hispanic tradition, the Loizada, right, as it's called in some areas, and then a picture of now one of the community gardens in the Lower East Side that it's, for us, we understood as the main manifestation of what's going on today in terms of social innovation there. We did the same thing in Brooklyn, at least in this area, understanding the very industrial roots of the neighborhood, what happened when the bridge was built or inaugurated in 1903. And the area became a super powerhouse in terms of industry and all the people coming to work, in the factories from the Domino to Pfizer and a couple of others there, peaking in the Second World War and up to the 60s still holding up, and then decay, Serpico being shot there, and this is Al Pacino, in case you can see from there. It's the Serpico movie, and it's this real story of this guy the cop who's shot in South 4th Street. And that's the state of decay that the place was, and in a way it was the beginning of the gentrification process. The other picture there is a couple of years back. I took this picture, this big building was being emptied, and all the artists that used to occupy it was having a farewell party and leaving a mark behind, because pretty much what was going on is that since artists moved into this place, to occupy the empty warehouses left behind by, decay industry, they are now also being kicked out somewhere else because of the rezoning of 2005, and all the neighborhood became more residential and gentrified, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is the conversation we were joining. The design work behind this was not so much historical, but it was it had many manifestations. The first one, it's the documentation part. So we went out to either with anthropologists and serial social science ethnographers, but also with our students. These are undergrad students at this point going on with their own reporters' books and interviewing, doing photograph surveys and all kinds of data collection about the community gardens in the Lower East Side. And subsequently, we, in the Brooklyn portion of the work, we hired filmmakers to cover what were the main social innovation stories in the area. So we got the occupation of the waterfront initiatives happening behind it, the whole sharing economy with all kinds of co-working, co-housing, and shared goods kind of schemes going on, documented in one of the films, and all the food-related food co-ops, community support agriculture, a number of other things happening in terms of food and transportation alternatives as well. So this was a sort of a picture of what was going on. We wanted to somehow put them together, cluster, and as a way to value what this story is going on, done by regular people who weren't really interested. At some point, some of them became almost like businesses, but at this point, we're interested in the tacit element of their initiatives. So this is one part of the work, and then we. having gathered some data, we promoted them what we've been calling a series of design games. And one of those, it's of course exhibitions. This one is first one we did in the Lower Side. This is done in a community center art space in the Lower Side, and we created together with Peer and Applied a series of devices, some low-tech, some high-tech, if you can call an iPod a high-tech at this point. But we had a table with some flashcards. We had a map, and basically we ask people to, okay, if you know about a social innovation or an interesting initiative going on in your neighborhood, write it down and flag it in a map. So it was also a data collection device that we had there, and we had a couple of, this is last year in Brazil, we did a similar version of this in a neighborhood over there as well. In another situation in Brooklyn, we decided to go to use a different kind of design game, and what we did was basically to create a community design studio. In 2 weeks, we set up this space in a basement of a big not-for-profit organization in North Brooklyn area, and we had a series of workshops with different stakeholders in the neighborhood with different objectives and ideas, and we started with the space was sort of a semi-empty space. We had some data already there on the walls, a lot of research done at that point, but it was through the work of our students who spent then 1 week, and then a couple of other people in the second week. The space was transformed as we spent the days there. In the Bronx, we did a slightly different kind of action. We were asked at this point by the City Parks Foundation, a partnership of parks, to promote a sort of this community engagement or action to ask people from the living in the area surrounding the Soundview Park, which is a huge park, super nice, but for some reason not really embraced by the community as one would expect. And for many reasons, geographic, it used to be a landfill 50 years ago. There's still that memory lingering on. And our students created a series of design probes that have helped somehow contributed to creating local identity, creating conversations about how to reach the water from there. That was not even that was clear to people living there for more than 10 years. They didn't know they could get to the water through the park. So, and that developed further in a couple of other projects by our students that are now being implemented and piloted. The results of this process also include toolkits, sort of instructables, if you will, right, to facilitate diffuse practice. So learning from, a community support agriculture scheme, large scale, how can I do that in my own life? How can I incorporate that? So the toolkits wanted to bring the idea that you can also do that and diffuse those practices. We did this. This is a sort of a summary of the model of the different things we've been, the design games and design devices we applied throughout this more than almost 3-year time. So the interviews, the themes, we produce the films, documentation, they're online, they're shown in exhibitions, we do the workshops, toolkits, and then some of those the projects resulting from workshops, they turn into pilots. Now, so this was very. This project is still alive. We're still doing a couple of actions related to that in Brazil, and then I did early in January in Germany, in Cologne. But what I wanted to show was also some other aspect of the work we've been doing more recently. We got a second grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, and the question we posed in this project was, can design be a catalyst for social innovation in the public sector? Because we've been talking with people from the bottom up. Can we talk with policymakers, with government in general, and public service providers? Can they somehow be open to incorporate those kind of social innovations in this public service delivery? So I think this was a great question. This project's still active, it's still going on. We partner with, I'll talk later. Basically, what we're trying to do here was to look into the crisis of governance, right? So there's somehow a distrust that seems to be out there all the time, right? It's not that our systems are necessarily totally corrupt. Some of them are certainly other parts of the world, where I come from certainly is. But there is a tremendous challenge, I think, throughout the world. All the crises we've seen, every time we see a new country, a new city, people starting protests, as we know today, has something to do with that. The crisis of political representation and governability. But we see also this kind of picture as opportunities for design, because designers can help, redesigning service structures and infrastructures, promoting systemic innovation, contribution to create the conditions for change, at least, and imagine new forms of political participation. So this project tries to build on this, the picture of crisis, but also try to look at it as an opportunity. So we, in this project, partner with HPD. It's New York City Department of Housing and Preservation Development. It's one of the two housing agencies in the city. The other is NYCHA. HPD looks into all kinds of things, from access to public housing, the lottery system that gets you there, into maintenance of tenant apartments when you have mold and etc. All that is done by them, and a couple of other things. And we partner also with the Public Policy Lab, which is a not-profit advocating for better public services through design. And we involved a lot of our students here. We did a couple of projects, a couple of courses actually, focusing on opportunities and for new ideas into the service that HPD offers into the different areas. And some of the projects were more, exploratory. And right now, Public Policy Lab has a couple of professional fellows developing. There being several iterations of some of the pilots that are now being tested and implemented. So this is going on as a more traditional, if you will, service design work. And some of this, it's more on an incremental level of change. But by doing this work, we also realized that there was this kind of place being explored around the world of places for innovation in government that could happen sometimes within government, which is the case of Mind Lab in Denmark, and sometimes it occurs outside. That's the case of the French example, 27 region. But we try to map. We did this exercise. Eduardo and Daniela did this exercise of mapping out this special places being promoted in around the world to try to imagine how to improve the public service delivery. And so this somehow helped us to gauge our work against, but also see that this is a huge opportunity for designers moving forward. And that's the area that we are interested in. In this final example, this is basically a studio, a course studio last semester. We did the Transdisciplinary Design MFA program right here, Parsons. The idea was we proposed to our students, what if new mayor takes in, the elections were going on, and what if the new office that de Blasio, we didn't know it was de Blasio at that point, was to launch, was the New York City Office for Public Imagination. Well, what kind of place would that be? What kind of service would they offer? It was really an exercise of design fiction. So some students, some groups did a lot of experimentations in public spaces. They experimented with devices that imagine new forms of governance that this office could employ and make possible. And then we have, as a result of this project, more and more speculative critical design, if you will, kind of result. This group of students enter this avenue of humor and, design a whole series of provocative objects, boundary objects, if you will, to try to promote, enter a conversation with local residents. We also had a storefront in the Lower Side too. And for one very cold afternoon, they set shop, basically. They opened the shop, and they had this series of objects as they were selling them. And then they started a conversation with people through them. Other things happened, but I'll cut short for now. Now, my point, I guess, in concluding is we have been exploring how design can activate what I call the latent agencies. Agencies they're already there. People already doing things. It's just that sometimes they don't realize, or they're not seen or framed or evident enough for us. That's somehow a little bit more hidden in, not for certain, not in big media for most part. And so that's pretty much the case here, right? Trying to promote from the bottom up. But also we think there is a latent agency in terms of government being able to embrace those things and in promoting and imagine new structures, new forms of service co-production and delivery in the public sector that could happen and can be imagined and put in place there. And then, finally trying to imagine this sort of middle ground, mid up and down place where, with these special places, the public innovation, public imagination places where this dialogue can occur and where designers can really try to, be the somehow cultural brokers between these two worlds. I cannot tell you that, the work with the public government, for example, how hard it is sometimes for you to break barriers and how oftentimes it's so different from the work that designers are normally used to do, even language-wise, even in time frames or participatory practices that need totally to be reproposed in this kind of a space for many reasons. So I think, however, there is a huge interest and opportunities, and I like imagining that design can be part of this conversation, and we have design, what have been called design games, the tradition and the participatory methods world. Design fiction has been pretty much the case there, and the more applied kind of service design is the middle project. So these are my projects for now, and if you want, you can download a couple of our publications about it. Thanks.
So that was very exciting and very interesting, and I will try to make sense of it in front of you, and I hope you help me with that. I'm a sociologist, as you know, and I'm coming here, but a kind of a weird sociologist. I think about society in dramaturgical perspective. Perhaps better, I think about society through theater. And the key elements in the theater, you have actors. Actors are the key. Then there is a set. Then there is a design, right? And there is an important element of interaction between people on the stage and people in the audience. Audience, you don't have theater without the audience. We would not be here without you. So while listening to the prior session and while listening to my colleagues now, I was thinking, where do I go from here? Let me just tell you a few things about how we sociologists think about agency. Because, all the time I was trying to protest, but I shouldn't protest, we are just coming from a different place. So just very, very quick thing about what does it mean, really, for us, for those people who do sociology. What does the agency mean? Well, there is a big discussion, and the discussion, I'm not going to go much far, because it's fogginess and fuzziness and lack of clarity is related to the concept of agency. Some people think it's a selfhood, or other categories that are associated with agency are selfhood, motivation, will, intention or intentionality, purposiveness, choice, initiative, freedom, creativity, performativity. I will stop. This is all, if you want to move within agency. So there are those efforts to discipline it within my discipline of sociology, because it is a large semantic field, and if I will mentioning those categories that I mentioned, you realize it becomes a magnetic field indeed. So one thing we know is that agency forms and shapes social action. That we also hear. And I'm going to mention, I'm influenced by various people, and I'm not influenced particularly by Giddens, but I have to tell you about the Giddens. So we will kind of make it a little bit more home, kind of popular sociology here. I'm very much influenced by Taylor and actually Hannah Arendt. So those are my teachers, and also a certain Russian philosopher of culture whose name is was, because he's dead, Mikhail Bakhtin. So Giddens talks about two kinds of knowledges. Discursive knowledge, that's the kind of knowledge we are having here, trying to kind of base on some kind of scholarly assumptions, expressed in words especially, and practical knowledge. And practical knowledge, it's a daily routine. We have a sense of being on the move, with a sense of historicity. So it's a kind of a situation in which modern people act, because knowing that things are changed, that things move ahead, and that actually they have a way of influencing that process, or influencing that move. That we subjects. By the way, agency is sometimes also called by some people outside of social sciences subjectivity. This doesn't work, but I have a long, big voice, so it doesn't matter. So at the foundation of Giddens' theory is the concept of subjectivity and agency. Meaning, for him, individuals appears as creators, and even before sociologists, interpreters of social world. Just to make it shorter and quicker, let me just say that, and maybe I should add that, people are, of course, different from any other kind of creatures, from any other kind of possible actors, in that we actually know that we know why, we know what, and we know why do we do things, and we are also in a position to do things otherwise. Now, that's a favorite phrase of Giddens, and I want you to hold on to this phrase because it's important. Different, otherwise meaning differently than we usually do things. So he comes up with this theory of structuration, and this is a Sociology 000, which was conceived to remove a dramatic tension between two things. The fact that we are being constrained by the society we live in. There was a conversation about gender. That's structure. We are structurally constrained by a variety of things related, like the way people think about gender, and they translate it into commodity, and so on, and so on, and so on. So there's structure, and there is agency. Agency is those are two opposite poles. So you can say that on one hand there is this antinomy, contradictions between agency and structure, between freedom, which comes with agency, freedom to act, freedom of an individual or groups which work together, and coercion of the system, which doesn't allow us to do things, which is a structure. So we don't want to think about ourselves as being pawns, determined by structural conditions, and Giddens was trying to solve that tension between structure and agency. On one hand, he said there is this imperialism of the structure. There are people who believe that we cannot do much because we are predetermined. And various ideologies and various systems of thought for whom determinism, particularly historical determinism or class determinism, was very, very important. And some people are trying to fight it. And then there is, of course, another school of thought which talks about imperialism of the subject, meaning imperialism of the agency. And all those orientations are related to imperialism of the subject, which reduce structure or systemic feature of the society, which are trying to dismantle them or break them out. So, and there are all other sorts of things that I'm not going to talk about, and other interesting thinkers such as Bourdieu. So what is agency? I think that agency is not it's not that we always deal with agency. Agency is related to events. Agency concerns events, such events in which I or you or we as agents or doers have whatever moment, at whatever stage, have a capacity to work, to act otherwise than we usually do. That there is this transformative possibility inherent in agency. Agency is not just a regular behavior. Agency is something extra to what we normally do. It's actually something that tries to build on that behavior. So it's a process of social engagement, which is related to time. Yes, it's event. It's a time, and in other words, we look at the past, but we are trying to shape the present and look into the future, and we are trying to reshape it or redo it or change or transform it. Change is an important element here, of course. So agency is a social engagement that, by combination of different things, including our habits, but above all our imagination and a capacity to evaluate where we are, transforms the structures, transforms things that, the boxes that we are put in a process of interactive things. So, and then just to finish, I mentioned another name, Charles Taylor. Since he taught at the New School, philosopher, a Canadian philosopher who taught here for several years. For him, the most important element in agency, and all of that, what I'm saying, relates to what was said here before, is self-capacity to self-evaluation. To be an agent is to be able to self-evaluate your own actions, your own context, the situation in which you are, and make a decision. Agency is about choices. It's to figure out what it is desirable and what it's not desirable. Moreover, for him, and we'll leave it aside because I don't think we are talking about here today, agency is about radical choices, about something that engages us very deeply, something of a kind of big value. Hannah Arendt will come here. Right. All right, so where are we with all of that knowledge while looking at the presentations? They both were about a very interesting and very kind of transformative social engagement, but they are different. They are different. What Sean was presenting to us was staging capacity to think on your own, and maybe to prompt one to think that one can act otherwise. What Lara was presenting is actually joining a discussion, not staging a discussion, but joining a discussion on in which people already are acting otherwise. Well, in her third case, I think, when she was talking about the playing with the, when the drawings is fiction, this is where you guys too, in my opinion, of a completely person from outside. I mean, this is where you obviously meet. So for me, the project in Los Angeles, it's obviously an important project because this is as strange as it is, and this is why we don't want to live in Los Angeles, a place which has public spaces, but it doesn't have public spaces where people can meet and talk to each other. It is, unless you go to the ocean. Yeah, you can discuss that with me. I mean, unless you are in your car, and the cars cannot, they can negotiate it. Okay, I'm not going there. But it is, spaces are incredibly important. Spaces facilitate agencies. Buildings don't have agency. I'm still maintaining my opinion here, although I learned something and I will be happy to show. But I think spaces can make, can make action agentic, can turn us into agents, and so I think about that as important. So what Sean was doing, he actually took us to a space which was nothing but dead, or not, or people went there around their daily routines as they are. That's how we are socialized. We are taking our babies in the pink or on the blue for the walk, or and because this is habitus, right? This is what we are told. This is what we know how to do. And I think what he inserted into this place something unusual, something otherwise. And that's where the conversation can take place. What had happened in Brooklyn, in Greenpoint with all those Poles living there who were sitting there nervous because they didn't have green cards and they could not do anything without the green cards. Citizenship is an important element of agency. You cannot act if you don't have a rights, civic rights. That's why people who are illegal aliens or people who do not have papers are rightless in our society. Now, for them, it's a very important, to be a part of a community. Then, when you don't have to be as an individual, acting as an individual is important. So what we saw in Brooklyn is this extraordinary thing, which I'm totally into, although never thought about it that way, is that in order to change. And because of the kind of globalized pressures, to experience or to release agency or to think about it, you have to go and study the local knowledge. People know best what's best for them. It's not the designers who put them in the boxes. Local people will know best, and they did it. And what Lara was telling us, it's actually what they did is that they made it visible. They went there to make it visible. They made what invisible was visible. I think the question of visibility, that's Hannah Arendt. We don't have a public space if we are not visible. A public space, a space of assembly where people can meet and talk together, is it's a condition of any democratic society. So, and of democratic citizenship. For that reason, visibility is a key. If you speak about something in private, at home, so what? So to make things visible is I think, very important, very, very important goal or aim or task or vocation. And I'm really, so I was happy to see that now. Even for me, it wasn't visible. I go to shop there in the Polish shops, and that's it. That's where it ends up, yeah. So let's just think about that there is a public and there is a private. And things that are public make difference. They are often prepared in the public. Think about dictatorships, then this is the places where squares and plazas are becoming the only resort for people to gather, because if there is a lot of them, they think not much can be done to them. Even for us, plazas or squares, like our Zuccotti Park, turned out to be very handy until we learned that it's not public because it's private, right? I think I'm going to stop because I'm just too much. So going back to the question of agency, I only wanted to emphasize agency is not just any behavior, right? It's not that we are acting, but that there is this element of acting, differently. Yes, otherwise. I don't have a better word. Giddens was good with that. Thank you. You want to say something? I can talk. I can talk about the architecture later. I will talk about the buildings having agency. Yeah.
We have time for questions. Great. I need the mic.
I'm going to read it because I've been writing. I love how thank you for your presentations, both of you. I love how you have integrated design thinking to engage community-driven responses to issues of wellness, public spaces, government, emergency response. These projects you both shown involved students in the process as well as the community. That's the best way to increase social engagement. I have experience doing this type of projects, and I know it's really hard. I'm wondering, in the scale that you both are working, LA, New York, how do you orchestrate, since we were talking about like theater references, the symbiotic exchange of these participants, community and students, especially when some of these projects involved a long-term engagement? And I have a kind of a follow-up on that, which is, have you revisited these communities after a while to evaluate what changes, if any, have occurred? Thanks.
Sean.
Yeah. Yes. I think one of the real goals. One of the challenges that I put forward in my work is this idea of publicness or community. is to kind of not use kind of models of co-creation and participatory design, predominantly because, you know, a lot of their use to this point has been about really advancing a kind of consumerist agenda. You know, Samsung loves co-creation when they're thinking about their new mobile phone because they get ideas and it's about the everyday and they can integrate those. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Samsung and the designer are the authority figures, and it's advancing a kind of neoliberal agenda, I mean, from my perspective. And so when working with these, I'm much more interested in how these directly affect the political process. Again, a lot of my thinking is about the political process as a thing, whether those are mechanisms of policy. And so the big outcome of the LA Has Faults was that MacArthur Park, by city law, was not, basically all our parks are not allowed to host people in an emergency response scenario. It's illegal, actually. And so, but even though in that community, the predominant place of safety because of relationships with shifty landlords from their perspective, shoddy maintenance of buildings is, you know, we're going to the park. And overwhelmingly, that's what people say when they say, what would you do in an earthquake or of that magnitude? And so one of the real, you know, challenges for us was how to provide a mechanism by which people didn't just talk about it, but could influence the policy that responded to that. And so the big outcome of that for the community and for us, or the community that we were able to bring together around this. I mean, I think, sorry, that the term community I want to not just use as a default, but the community we were able to bring together around this, we're able to have that changed for MacArthur Park in order to deal with, you know, just the fact that the water's not potable and people are going there means the city's at risk of, you know, culpability for lack of participation. And so they were able to draft a plan that responded to that as an issue, and then that has a policy that has to be revisited over time and things like that. So it's one of the big outcomes for me, I think.
Hi, Natasha. Yes, I think in our case, for the first part of your question, how to build partnerships locally, right? How to penetrate neighborhoods, and even in terms of your credibility, how you start doing both research and design work. So the way we did this in Amplify, we try to do this every project that somehow has, you know, this kind of action involved, is to work with local organizations that are there for a long time. So in the Lower East Side, we partner with their official project partners, the Lower Side Ecology Center, which is a not-for-profit that's been there for over 30 years and is very much respected and has all the connections with the community gardens. So our students got to the community gardens after Lower Side Ecology Center, contact them and arranged the interviews and visits and etc., and created somehow the stage for that to happen, and the trust issue, that has to come with that. So that's really essential, and there's no way people coming from outside, even I live in one of the neighbors study here, and it's not that because I live there that I have access to the Polish community necessarily, which I do somehow, but that's another story. But no, I appreciate and shop.
Yes.
Polish shops.
Yes,
That's
very
what you,
good food.
all right, that's my bakery. Okay, great. So so that's one thing. So I guess establishing this key partnerships has been really important, and we try to keep them, in a long-lasting relationships. It's not possible all the time. And the second part of your question is very much related to that challenge, because if you go back and reevaluate or visit, we do that sort of informally. The only problem or challenge we have in doing that is that, in all these projects and being a research lab within a school, we're confined to the 15 weeks academic semester, fall, spring, and somehow structure. So we've been So we've been trying that's good in a way, because it somehow sets some time parameters that set exactly. But On the other hand, it's hard when it's hard if you want to establish and nurture a long-term partnership, because, and I'm sure many colleagues of mine do also work with external organization. That's the million-dollar question. That's the big challenge we have when we do that. I know you yourself have the same challenges. So the question is up in the air. I think the New School has been trying different strategies to deal with that. There is a collaboratorium. It's one of the projects going on, trying to investigate and some codify how people do that, and what are the best practices. How do we nurture that? Money is an issue, because when a grant finishes, It's not that you can do anything about it, and you can no longer pay your research assistant. So and then you need another one, a next one, and so these are questions I think for us to resolve.